So, fear of recurrence and late effects, living with uncertainty. Learn how to not let the fear of recurrence take over your life. It's a lot of words. It sounds like we have to tackle a big topic tonight. So I would like to simplify a little bit and just look at what seems to be relevant in all those fancy words. And I think what stands out is fear, uncertainty, and take over your life. And so what I'm going to try to do is, in a stepwise progression, take you through the process I believe is happening inside of you when you're faced with that topic. And challenge me along the way if you have questions. Sometimes I will confront you with ideas that are new, tickle your brain, and might at times be hard to relate to. So don't hesitate to just interrupt, because if I lose you along the way, then anything I say afterwards or later doesn't make any sense. So let's face it, when you get to the living with part, you've already gone through hell. You were diagnosed, there was a whole array of emotions. You went through treatment, and those two topics are just evenings in themselves. But tonight, we're going to focus on that living with part. I used to call that post-treatment, and it got me in trouble because patients would say, "What are you talking about, post-treatment? It never ends." So we're now calling it living with, but that covers a broad range of possibilities from I was diagnosed, I went through treatment, and I'm done, and I live with the fear of something coming back. Or living with sometimes means I still have something and have to live with what I have. So it's different for different situations. So it's a very broad category of living with once I'm diagnosed and once I go through treatment. So let's look at that living with part. I put all those words on the bottom, and as you can see, it has a lot to do with emotions, and I won't focus too much on the diagnosis and treatment, but the ones of you who have cancer or had cancer, I'm sure were surprised. Some of, was a shock to hear I'm sick. Some were really scared. They didn't expect it. Some were angry. It's not fair. Disappointed. Why me? When we get to the living with part, the emotions I put there, and there are many more, fear, guilt, worry. So living with uncertainty. What does that really mean? It's the worry that the cancer isn't really gone, might still be in me or comes back someplace else. Somehow I'm not free of this illness, even though many of you are. Done, cured. I know I'm not supposed to say that in the context of cancer, but it's the truth. One can be cured from cancer. So what I'm going to do is I write up there emotional experience with cancer. So obviously we're talking about feelings, emotions that people have in this phase of dealing with whatever it is you're dealing with. But it's not just emotions. And I call it laws of nature. When you are in this phase where you, as an example, worry about an upcoming scan, that would be the event. I have a scan in a month, and I'm already petrified about what's on there. Or some people don't want to know what's on it, or they're scared about what might be on it. I'm just giving a couple of examples. Or someone has a slight pinch in their chest. That would be an event, and all of a sudden they can't differentiate. Does that have anything to do with my cancer? Is that a sign of a recurrence and I got to run to the doctor and do something about it? Or is it just a little cold? So it ends up in you not feeling well. There is a process that goes from I need to get a scan in 3 months, somehow not feeling well. And what is that? I hinted at that it has something to do with emotions, but there are other things in that black box. It's not just emotions. And I want to take a closer look at the black box. There's also something that has to do with thought. So the event is, I have a scan, and then the thought is an F or an S word that I can't say out loud, or, oh no. It's a thought that refers to something happening in the future, and then the emotion that's attached to it. So now I'm going to confront you with the first piece that some of you will grapple with, which is, it's not the event that makes it difficult to live with. It's the thought you have about it and the emotion that's attached to the thought. It's not the event. But if anyone has a hard time with that, speak up now, because I know very well from myself that I often feel when I experience anything, it has to do with what happened outside of me. So someone yells at me. I don't feel well, angry, whatever, and it's very easy to be tempted into the belief that the fact that I don't feel well has to do with the unkind words that were spoken outside of me. But it's not those unkind words. It's the words that go in my ears, get processed in the brain, and get transformed into thoughts and emotions that then lead to stress. So if anyone has a problem with that concept, speak up. And we can go back to it, because I know already I will hear from some of you, and I know it from my patients that say, well, of course I'm scared because I have a scan in 3 months. But then they skip this whole part about what happens inside of them. So somehow I now make a claim. It's not the event, whatever event it is, has to do with thought and emotion somehow doing something to us. And examples for those thoughts and emotions you all know better than I do. I put some examples up there. A thought is, when is the next shoe going to drop? Good chance it's attached to fear. Thoughts, I know I'm going to die. This comes from people who are cured. Naturally, there's fear attached. This is never going to end. Those are all thoughts. Thoughts that are in reaction to something that happened to your body, which was event cancer. And I'm sure you know many more of those examples, but the importance of this concept is that it comes from your mind. So this is what the mind does when it's confronted with an event. It thinks and it feels. So just to put up there, to back me up, I looked up like on Wikipedia or Google Answer or whatever, how is the mind defined? And sure enough, I got lucky. It says the human consciousness that originates in the brain and is manifested especially in thought, yippee, perception, emotion, yippee, there it is, will is highly overrated in my book, memory and imagination. But we'll get back to will also. So thought and emotion comes out of here. And I just put that up there also because you'll see later, thought defined as an idea or opinion produced by thinking. So it is a production of your thinking, or, and this is important, occurring suddenly in the mind. It just happens. It doesn't feel as if you produced it. It popped into your mind. And I just put that up for another reason. Emotion, I keep talking about the importance of thought and emotion. Emotion is a mental state that arises spontaneously. Again, it just happens, rather than through conscious effort, and is often accompanied by physiological changes. That part is very important, because that's the next part that a lot of you get into trouble with, and I'll show you why. So I said that earlier, this is my claim. It's not an event that's stressful, but the thoughts and emotions associated with the event. And again, event is a very broad term. It can mean a lot of different things for different people. but like I will get a scan in 4 weeks. And that other slide hinted already at it with the emotions. Emotions have a physiological response in the body. A lot of us are not aware of that. But this is very important because when it has an impact on the body, that's a third stressor. It's not just the thoughts and the emotions, but what the thoughts and the emotions do to the body that adds stress. And you'll see in a minute why. Unfortunately, I have to now give you a little anatomy lesson, so bear with me, because again, that's something that's sometimes hard for people to grapple with, that somehow what happens up here presumably has a connection to down here. So the framework is the brain is an organ like the heart or the liver, and it's part of the body. That sounds so normal, but some people don't have a sense that the brain is just like the liver or the gut. It's just an organ. Some of us have a sense that it's more abstract. Things like will, emotion, thinking are abstract things, but they are a production of this thing up here. So I'll keep this brief. I talked about the mind, now I talk about the body. We always talk about mind-body integration. And you don't need to know the details. I just cut it in half on the left side. Brain has nerve fibers. Go to the periphery. If you lift your arm, it's a conscious effort. There's a wire going from here to the muscles, and I can now, at will, wave to you. However, the thing on the right side is called autonomous nervous system, and it also comes from the brain, has wires going to every single cell in your body. But it's more for the internal organs, and you don't need to know all the details, but it puts these little pictures there to demonstrate. Goes to the heart, goes to the liver, goes everywhere from here to here. And for all practical purposes, you can skip the whole anatomy lesson if you remember that this autonomous nervous system needs to be balanced. And if it's not balanced, something can happen is that we are in constant stress. There are hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, all kind of stuff that gets constantly secreted if we're under stress. So that's where the mind, the emotion comes back into. If I think stressfully, if I feel stressfully, the way we talked before, it will impact that system, and your body will feel as if it's in a fight, flight, freeze response. The fancy word for that is sympathetic hyperarousal. That's something you might occasionally read or hear from your doctor. But you keep it simple and just think of, I'm uncomfortable. That's the fight, flight, freeze. That's called sympathetic. Or I'm comfortable. That's the balancing system. That's called parasympathetic. And it's more there for rest, digest, and play. And the reason why that's so important that that's in a good balance, you see on here. If the sympathetic, that's the right side, is overstimulated, not just do we think strange thoughts and feel stressful emotions, our whole body goes haywire. In the brain, it affects us. We can't sleep. We're irritable. We're distractible. In the heart, we might feel palpitations, chest discomfort. Sometimes people say, I can't breathe, shallow breathing. Stomach, nauseous. Sometimes people say, I have heartburn. Further down, abdominal discomfort, even diarrhea. And now imagine this. We talked about the thought being stressful. We talked about emotions being stressful. And stress is then experienced in the body as any of those things. And now it gets really tricky, because if you have shallow breathing and you happen to have lung cancer, it will be very, very hard for you to differentiate whether that shortness of breath or the shallow breathing is a result of stress, because you have stressful thoughts and stressful emotions, or it has anything to do with your body at all. I mean, other than thought and emotion. So let's step back a little bit and just imagine that for yourself. Can you take a moment and just check in with yourself? What do I think right now? Just open eyes, closed eyes, whatever. Can you identify what you're thinking? Most people can do that. The next one is a little harder. Can you identify what you're feeling right now, emotionally? And keep it to the 4 basic emotions: happy, sad, angry, and anxious. If you had to settle for one of those right now, do you know what your emotions are? And there are flavors in between. And some people have problems with that. But when in doubt, keep it to those 4. And the last step, do you have awareness of your body right now? Do you know what this autonomous thing I'm projecting up there with all these fancy pictures is doing inside of you right now? Are you in the comfortable category or in the uncomfortable? Do you have awareness for your body in terms of comfort or discomfort? And the reason why that's important is the topic of tonight is how to overcome the fear of uncertainty, how to live with this comfortably. So if you're not comfortable in whatever category, I want to move you over to that parasympathetic thing we're going to talk in a little while. But right now I'm claiming thought, emotion, and body can go haywire when you are faced with what you're faced, which is living with whatever. And there's an additional reason why the thought, emotion, body connection is tricky, because it's a vicious cycle. So it starts out with an event. I'm always using my scan example because that happens so often, but you're welcome to give me others if you're getting tired of that one. I have a scan in a month, is the event. The thought is, I projected it earlier, OS, and the emotion attached to it, anger, fear, whatever. You might not be aware of that. This might all happen outside of your awareness. Body goes haywire, can't sleep that well. Your partner tells you that you're not as nice anymore. And then it gets worse. Then you're convinced, let's assume the event is actually not a scan, but a body sensation, belly ache. Belly ache, the thought is, oh, I hope this isn't cancer. The emotion is fear. The body then, because in reaction to stress, will have a more pronounced belly ache. And then you know it's cancer, when in fact you don't. But it becomes very, very hard to differentiate. Something that is just a thought, just an emotion, and just a stress response, all of a sudden you know is cancer. You lose the ability to differentiate thought from reality. Very common. And not just with cancer, by the way. We all do it. We often, when we get in these stress cycles that feed on each other, we lose the ability to differentiate thought from reality. And some of you, to go back, have already figured out that negative thinking, or let's call it stressful thinking and stressful emotion, is tricky. I often have clients that come in and say, I should not feel angry or sad, I should feel grateful. I'm done with cancer. So how come I feel angry or sad? But thinking of the slides before, it becomes apparent. If you think of the scan and are scared, you can't feel grateful. That's where we have to go back to that other nervous system we'll talk in a minute. And it's the same thing with thoughts. These morbid things I projected up earlier. I'm going to die. The doctor told you 50 million times you're cured. Looks you straight in the eye, you're done. And you know you're going to die. I'm taking an extreme, but it actually happens. And then you judge yourself for it. Everyone told you, think positive, be happy, don't stress, you're all done. And tells you I should not think negative thoughts. They will make my cancer come back. So now it gets worse. You know, you're supposed to think positive. You can't, and now you're putting stress on your body, and you cause your cancer to come back. So how much fun is that? And, you know, I say it's a law of nature. I'm not sure it's really true. But it's true for me, and I claim it's true for 99.9% of the population. Not many people can reason themselves out of emotion and thought. You can tell yourself 1,000,000 times, don't feel angry. In a lot of people, that makes the emotion more pronounced. If they hear don't feel angry, they get more angry. There are a few that can actually do it, but it's rare. And so if you are someone who can't do it, don't worry. There are other ways to feel good. So back to the chain of events. I'm always giving the same example. Black box, we now know what's in the black box. Thoughts and emotions. And they result in this category unwell that we looked at with this body thing I projected. So there are really 3 components to it. And now, I don't mean to confuse you, but I'm going to add a little piece that I believe is important. And so I'm just going back to illustrate again and for you to remember, because it's easy to walk out of here and not take what's relevant, which is thought, emotion, and body. But then Kogon, of course, has to add something, which is, I now claim that between the thought and the emotion, there's an additional step. You don't really have the emotion as a result of the thought, but as the result of an unmet need. And I'll illustrate with my example. Have a scan in 2 weeks. We know the thought process. And it is now the unmet need for certainty that gets your system go haywire. It's actually not the thought itself, but the realization, I don't know what's on this thing in 2 weeks, and I don't even really want to know. I don't want to think about it, but I'm thinking about it anyway. And it's that desire for certainty that in that moment isn't met. And that's what makes the emotion basically give you a signal. Say, hey, I'm scared because my need for certainty isn't met. And so we talked about thought and emotion, checked it off, but I want to talk a little bit more about need and how to identify that, because that creates a lot of confusion, also, you know, confronts some of our belief system that we're not supposed to have needs. So like if I need certainty, then you're being told, no, you don't, it's okay, you don't really need it. But I believe the body does. I also say we can't always satisfy them, but at least we need to recognize them. So what are needs? Oh, my slide got messed up. So on the right side, I kind of put garden variety, human needs, acceptance, recognition, love, intimacy, closeness, autonomy. Those are things that identify human beings. On the left side of the left column is needs that I believe are important for people that had an experience with cancer, because it wasn't normal, it was very unpredictable. There was no control or little control. Everything felt out of order. Sometimes accountability of people in your surroundings is being questioned. You know, you might feel like you didn't get fast care, you didn't get perfect care, you didn't feel like people didn't return phone calls. You get traumatized on that need side. Things aren't fair. You weren't supposed to get cancer. You know, you ate right, you did everything right. Independence, health. You know, once you've gone through chemotherapy, radiation, or surgery, the concept of health becomes a very different one. You know, you need your body to function. It pooped out on you, and now it better work. And when it doesn't, it's very stressful. So when we go back to putting that need thing into the vicious cycle, it gets even worse. Because you think The body realizes need not met, emotions go haywire, body goes haywire, and then you definitely know I have cancer, even when you don't. And so how are we getting out of this vicious cycle? So this is now my claim. Happy to be challenged. It is not the event that's stressful, but the thoughts, emotions, and unmet needs associated with the event. And I keep, pointing that out for the sole reason that this is going to be your leverage to do something about it, because we want you to feel well. So far, we have figured out that it's very easy to end up in the sympathetic arousal stress category. Various ways. Also realize that some of you are more thought-driven. Some of you are more emotionally driven. Some are more body-oriented. So I sometimes have people come and say, it's so weird. I always was very even-keeled, and now I'm so emotional. I cry all the time, and I'm mean to my wife, and, very emotional reactions. Others are more thought-driven. They cannot stop thinking. The same thought ruminates, preoccupies their brain over and over and over, particularly at night, but also during the day. It's almost like it rethinks itself in a short circuit. And with the body, some people are mostly body-driven. They don't experience emotions and thought much. They're not even aware of it, but they have all kind of physical symptoms. And that can be tricky, because then you go see your primary care doctor, say, I have this chest thing here, and this hurts, and I can't sleep, and, what's wrong with me? And you get a major workup, because everyone is rightly so scared that you actually might have cancer. Again, it's hard to differentiate. You got to take these symptoms seriously. I'm not saying to discard them. You have to take them seriously. But you have to differentiate what's a symptom that might be a sign of cancer versus what's a symptom as a result of stress. So broad range of how we humans express ourselves. And you can check in with yourself right now. Do you think you're a more thought-driven person, a more emotionally driven person, or are mostly expressing yourself or experience yourself in body? And a lot of us are a mixture. And so, same circle, but now we call it cycle of contentment. Because the same way you can be in a vicious cycle, you can be in a positive cycle. Because all of these things can be changed. One can change thought pattern, not through reasoning. One can address needs or learn to live with unmet needs. One can hooray, change emotions. That one is fun. And you can shift your body state. That picture with all the fancy organs where it said fight and flight? On the left side it said rest and play or digest. I can't remember, but it's basically feeling comfortable, getting this machine in a place that can feel comfortable despite having to live with the uncertainty of a recurrence. A lot of you will say, what's all this talk about? We have to live with that reality. And you're right. The reality is the possibility. And that's tough emotionally. But can one feel well emotionally, physically, and thinking-wise while one does not know whether or not one will maybe in the future have to face something unpleasant? It's this uncertainty that makes it so hard. And so I just want to pause because what I'm going to do is I'll just walk you through examples. We can even play around now. How much time do I have?
It goes till 8.
But the official talk?
Oh, about 45 minutes.
Okay, so I have a proposal. See if that sits well with you, because I want you to have a little time to have that information settled. See if it somehow sits strangely or fits. because if it sits strangely, we want to go over it again and see what your questions and doubts are. Because if we want to get in a cycle of contentment, then those are the things we have leverage over, and I want to show you how. And that's fairly practical. So let's just take a minute or so of questions, or more challenges. Not so much questions, we can do that later, but challenges. Anyone have a problem with this concept? Or a question about it?
Well, it just seems like the negative thing that could happen is more powerful than the uncertainty in my mind. So, so I guess I'm questioning that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's actually something very interesting about the human mind that I personally believe, I don't have any scientific proof for it, that our need for certainty is so pronounced that we put thoughts into a future that we don't know. So in this context, we always end up with the conversation about statistics. And I hate the conversation, but we have to have it because it has to do with numbers and this event. And I'm making it very broad and general, so it doesn't apply to any of you individually. But if I now tell you, you have a 50% chance of being dead in 5 years, how does it help you? Because you don't know which half you're in. 50% of you will be dead and 50% of you will be alive. But you don't know. And rather than say, let me learn how to live with not knowing which half I'm in, we make up scenarios that suit us. We place a certainty, and some people are the ones that say, I will never get it again. Those are the ones that more align themselves with the category, I'm done with this. The other half will say, I know I'll get it again. So it's the mental way of creating certainty, when in fact, reality is, I don't know which half I'm in. And can I live comfortably, happily, as if both is going to be true? Can I be comfortable with knowing that an end is in some defined future? Can I be comfortable with living both ends of the spectrum? I'm now going to live today as if I'm going to live forever, and today I'm going to live as if the end is near. So this is the extreme version of that, but it addresses a little bit what you say. So this event is so horrific that one tries to grapple with it in thinking, emotionally, with needs, and I can demonstrate that. So let's take an example. Someone has breast cancer and they have a chance of it coming back. Very common scenario, unfortunately. And the sentence then would be, I don't know if I'm in the X% group that gets it or the X% group that doesn't get it. And depending on which group you place yourself in mentally, the thinking is totally different. If you think you're the one that will get it, your thought and emotion process will be a very different one than if you put yourself in the category mentally, I won't get it. But you don't know. Sorry, does that address some of what you were asking? Okay.
I'm just thinking of the situation where doctors recommend operation, preventive operation, like breast removal.
Exactly that scenario.
This is somehow how you can take control over it. So how do you recommend to make to deal with it? I mean,
Could you
Perfect
repeat the question in case somebody...
Yeah, so the question was, doctors sometimes make recommendations. And the example was a mastectomy, to have your breast removed. You might have cancer in one breast, but out of fear that it comes up in the other, that you get it in the other breast, you have that breast removed. But you have no idea whether or not you will have it. So what you're doing is you're playing with statistics. So you're decreasing the probability of getting it. And you're absolutely right. That's your way of taking control. And if you face that scenario, you have to ask yourself, if I'm the one that would get it, if I'm the one that gets it, would I then decide now to have my breast removed now, or deal with it then when I get it? Versus someone saying, well, that's actually the answer to the control. You know, if you assume you're getting it, would you make a decision to have your breast removed now, or would you choose to deal with the cancer later? But some people wouldn't. So you're somewhere on that range where they say, I don't want to deal with that later, let's fix it now. Others would say, okay, if I'm in the category that gets it, then I'll deal with it later. And if you place yourself in the category, I'm not getting it, presumably, then the answer is easy. So if
for doctors, I guess.
why? I don't understand the remark.
I mean, I made the experience that I was diagnosed with a certain kind of mutation, and they highly recommend hysterectomy. And I don't want that. I'm saying to myself, I'm done with it.
Yeah, and so,
But
so
every time I go to her, she said, you still haven't decided?
yeah, so you feel like you're being wronged for your assertiveness about making a decision. Yeah, just realize on the spectrum of possibilities, one can approach that differently. And you've found something that works for yourself, and maybe can tell your doctor that this is your way of dealing with it. You don't need that level of control. You can live with some level of uncertainty, and you're ready to deal with it should you be in the I get it again category, which is a mental challenge.
If someone has had a brain issue, do you look at them in the same way in terms of what they should do, what they shouldn't do, what, just...
Not sure I understand the question. Like, if the brain is affected, these laws don't apply, or can you be more specific?
Everything that has been discussed so far, I can't tell if that really is the same, because I've had breast cancer twice, now I have brain cancer. And it's a really different feeling and priorities and everything. And so it's...
Yeah, so to me, it's the same principle. It might play itself out differently, I suspect, because of your need set having changed. But I don't know, I don't know you well enough, but...
different parts of the body. It's not just how I am affected by something. It's people in general that have that kind of diagnosis. Everything's different. So you feel like your thinking or your emotions might be affected through the cancer itself? Yes. Your language, your everything. Yeah, I mean, that is true. It can happen even through treatment. It doesn't even have to happen through brain cancer itself or a metastasis of breast cancer or whatever can grow up there. It can happen through treatment. I work with a lot of people that come and they're done and they say, I can't think anymore. My brain doesn't work after radiation and chemo. So I'm not sure I fully address your question. I know when something affects the brain, on average, it's scarier than when it affects other parts of the body. Well, I have to say, I'm having trouble expressing myself
Yeah.
well,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, it's just the way it is. So.
And you still think you have emotions, you have needs, and your body is still a body. But I do know that when the brain is affected, since it's such a central organ and such a coordinator and master computer, it can be even more scary.
I'm having a little trouble getting from thought to need for emotion and making sense of it. If I am one who is prone to think about something a lot, and therefore worry about it and have emotions that derive from that worry, and I'm dealing with a subject that is likely not to allow me to have much control actually, or much certainty in it actually. So how much different is this than someone telling me not to be angry and the inherent nature, because I'm just telling myself in a way not to be angry, aren't I trying to find some mechanism through thought that eliminates, since I can't be certain about it, now I'm not going to have control over it, I'm essentially just saying not have that emotion.
Yeah.
And how different is that than someone else saying, well, don't be angry, and then I'm back into, did that actually make me more angry or less?
Yeah, I don't believe that mechanism works. I'm going to talk about, how to alter thought process and what to do when the need can't be fulfilled. You're absolutely right. A lot of you are in a situation where you can't get control and you can't get certainty. But that doesn't mean you're doomed, because one can learn to comfortably live with uncertainty. And I can show you in a minute how. So if you want to, we can just go through a couple of examples so you have a sense that, the talk is how to, I forgot the title of the talk, but it had something to do with overcoming something. Yeah, overcoming uncertainty.
Can you do that 50-50 example? 50% chance you might get it again, 50% that you're not.
How to deal with that?
I would love to learn how to go through the cycle of contentment.
Yes, I'm delighted to do that. So let's go through, that's actually a good idea. Let's take that as an example where we can see how we can alter thought, how we can address needs or learn to live with unmet needs and so on. So the reality is, did I do something bad? See, I was going to call it the end, but it's now the beginning. So you gave me the prompt for the beginning. So let's take that example. So reality is, I don't know whether or not I get it. I was told I have a 50% chance yes and a 50% chance no. So now for you, we have to do two different processes. One is where the mind thinks I'm in the 50% where I will get it, and the other one where you're the 50% that doesn't get it. I guess that one is the easier one. Do actually people do that? Do they know? Do they realize that they sometimes mentally connect to I will not get it, and sometimes mentally connect to I will get it? Yeah. So if you do that flip-flop, realize that when you're in the I'll get it category, according to my vicious cycle thing, you won't feel well. If you're in the I won't get it, you feel reasonably well because the body doesn't have stress. So for all practical purposes, let's walk through the exercise I will get it. Because if you connect to the thought process I won't get it, usually you feel pretty good. And realize when the body does that flip-flop, that in itself is stressful. So if you develop awareness which thought you connect to, that in itself can be helpful when you say, oh, wait a minute, am I connecting to the 50% that get it or the 50% that don't get it? If you connect to the 50% that don't get it, you're done because you feel well. And if you connect mentally to the ones that will get it, then your thought process is, what are you thinking if you know you're getting it again?
I'm thinking I have a lot of work to get done and I get all stressed because I have to prepare.
Okay, so the thought process is, I have to prepare. This is for an event that we don't know whether or not it's going to happen. I have to prepare. That's the thought. The need, I would say, is what? I guess preparedness, completion. What is it? The need for, can you identify it? Closure. Someone said closure. So getting it doesn't mean we're dying from it necessarily. Who said closure? So you're assuming closure means if I get it again, I'm done for good?
No, closure to this need that you want to finish and get something done that is in your vision as I have to accomplish this before.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And you want to
Okay. That good idea. I like that. Does that apply to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
My mind goes on ahead and thinking of the ultimate end because we really don't know each time you get cancer. That's the last time. So in some ways I'm also thinking about closure at the end.
So this is the next step where you have to differentiate. So now you know you first went through the decision tree. I'm connecting to I don't have it, I'm done, this is good. Now I'm connecting to I get it. And now we're hearing there is a near future and there is a remote future. Then you gotta develop awareness for which branch are you in. Let's go down for the immediate future one. I'll get it again, but it won't kill me right away. So there the need is, we heard closure, to somehow wrap my head around how do I want to live now if that scenario were to happen? Certain things. What do you want to do? Is there something that needs to be done? If you go in the need category, and I have that slide somewhere again, but where? I'm not sure here. You know, are you someone who needs normalcy? Do you just want to go about your business? Are you someone who needs control? The body, we learned, calms down when it gets this stuff. You know, Keith pointed out, and that's an answer to your question, I can't get control, predictability. The body is pretty stupid that way. If you give it something else, it'll be fine. So you can't get control over the knowledge whether or not you're the one that gets cancer again. You do have control over your dishes. You do have control over your laundry. You do have control over your shopping list. And that might sound very mundane, but the body is stupid that way. So if you mentally connect to, I don't have control over the knowledge whether the cancer comes back, say, I need control. What can I control right now? And this.
That's why I make all those lists.
Yes. Bingo, thank you for saying it. So we have more list makers. Yeah.
Or people who try to control the other people
Yes.
around them.
Thank you. Causes a lot of trouble, a lot of conflict in relationships. But once you know what you're doing, you can remove it from the relationship. It's also important that you don't judge it. If you then say, I need control, I shouldn't need control. Body doesn't operate that way. If you need control, you need it. You can challenge yourself and say, well, do I need as much control as I need today? I mean, we can tickle our brains. And so, to go back to the example, so do you feel like we have addressed the arm where there's an immediate future, I've get it, it's the discomfort of not having control, but let's get control someplace else. I'm completing my list and my body calms down. If you now consciously start to use that, you will notice overall that the worrisome thinking in the future decreases because you have control now, which is the only time when you have any control anyway. And it addresses a little bit what you said earlier. So the catastrophic thinking, when people say, I know I'm going to die from this, even though they don't, or they even know they're going to die from it soon. I mean, people know all kinds of things they don't know. It's also, in my mind, an attempt at control. You're predicting the future because you need predictability. And so you're putting something into the future that's predictable, even though it's probably not real. It might be real, but there's a good chance it's not.
So where's denial fit in this whole thing?
I love denial. Denial is cool. So I had this cartoon I wanted to put up, but unfortunately it had like this copyright over it, and it was like what are those birds called? An ostrich with a head cut off, and you see kind of the head run off, and the head dug in the ground, and the body run off, and the ostrich say, "This is cool, you know, I can keep my head in the sand and run off at the same time." So, you know, you flee and you avoid. So as long as you know what you're doing, nothing wrong with that. You might get into trouble with others. So if you give me an example of avoidance, I presume you said denial, but avoidance. I'm thinking of emotional expression. You know, some of you are confronted with, well, you don't look good today, you know, tell me how you're feeling. And that's the last thing you want to do, is share your feelings. You just want to plant daisies in the garden because it gives you a sense of normalcy. And then they say, well, you can't avoid your emotions, you know, it'll make you sick. And not true. When we look at research, that there are some people that are better at suppressing. They do better physically and emotionally when they suppress their emotions. And there's another group of people that do better when they express. So imagine a suppressor lives with an expressor. That's a problem. And then a lot of people can't meet their need for peace because it will create conflict. I should put peace up there. So did we, I feel like we're not done with the scenario where you think into the far future. You know, we did the scenario where you say in the thinking process, you go into, I get it again, it has to do with order and control and completion, and play with it. See if it actually makes a difference. The far off scenario, I find from a human perspective a very interesting and challenging one, which is the sentence, I have no idea what the future brings. That's the reality. You know, actually, I put it up there in the, I think it put mine in the, here, it's even here. The reality is I know nothing about the future. I mean, the only thing you probably know that you eventually at one point will die. That's the only certainty you have. Nothing else is certain. And the body doesn't like that concept at all because we don't like uncertainty. And this is uncertainty. So the obstacles to changing the thought process, I think you gave me an example, someone gave me an example of a stressful thought. Yeah, like the thought, I know I have cancer. I will die from cancer in the near future. It's a thought. And the obstacle with changing thought is that thoughts are being confused with reality. People don't realize it's just a production of this little machine that's trying to grapple with this traumatic, emotionally catastrophic event. And instead of saying it's just this little machine malfunctioning, the thought becomes reality. A thought is just what it is. It's a thought. And the solution is, I want to give you an illustration for, or actually let's practice a little bit. You know, the thought is the first thing that I said, let's look at changing. In the beginning, I asked you to check in with yourself if you're aware of a thought. So let's do the same thing again. This is the thing where it just pops up. It just happens. You didn't make it. You didn't make the thought. It just happens. But let's now make thought. So can you keep the thought that popped up arbitrarily? Can you kind of keep it in your mind? And now I want you to, either with your eyes open or closed, create a thought. Could be anything. I'm big. I'm nice. I love flowers. And see if you have the power to create positive thought. Think of something that recently made you smile. Something that recently made you happy. You can even just close your eyes and think of the color green. It's a thought. It's a production of your brain. And see if you struggle with that. Some people, the thought-driven people struggle with this one because they say, well, I'm trying to think about something funny and all I can think is I'll die tomorrow. And it can be very, consuming if you are in the ruminating category, in this preoccupation where I say when the body is stressed, it's preoccupied with the thought. So I'm curious, you don't have to share it if you want privacy, but I'm curious if a reasonable amount of people could create a positive thought. Do I get nods or shakes? Yes, I have a few nods here. So when your brain spontaneously goes haywire in thought, it thinks. That's what the thought slide said in the beginning. It thinks spontaneously, and we can also make it happen. Both true. So when it thinks spontaneously, you have just demonstrated to yourself that you can create something else. Sometimes you need to cheat a little bit when the negative thoughts are so overwhelming or so conditioned. If someone has been thinking negatively for 30 years, 50 years, where it's just kind of an outlook on life, whatever you look at, it's more the glass half empty than the glass half full look on life. It's a little harder, but it can be practiced. This is a very malleable machine. It's a little computer. When you type in negative thought, if you do it 50 million times, it can learn. Any questions about the creation of positive thought? And the reason why we're doing that is because we want to physically get over to that, autonomous nervous system that's relaxed, that's happy, that's comfortable. That's one way of doing it. We know in the cycle, I'm going back to my little circle thing here. We know that the same way negative thought has this whole rat tail of problems, a positive thought does exactly the same thing in a good way. It relaxes the body.
So are you saying that positive thought, let's go back to that 50% chance that you will live up to 5 years, and you're at 4 years now, and you're thinking, I only have 1 year left. Are you saying that any positive thought, like green and relaxation and a happy moment, is that the kind of thought you're thinking? Or are you saying, no, you're going to live up to 10 years beyond?
Yeah, see, when it comes to creating fictitious reality, we have established that you don't know. You were told it's a 50% chance. 5 years. You don't know if it applies to you. You might be the one that lives for 40. So for you to now, at year 4, know that you're going to die at 5, automatically you put yourself in the category of the 50 that presumably die. But there you're not dealing with the reality, which is you don't know.
What's your positive thought?
I don't know when I'm going to die. I have not the faintest idea. And I'm now going to take a deep breath. I tell you what this breath business is about in a minute, also why that's so important. And I'm looking out the window. And I see if I can identify a plant that is meaningful to me, or a color that I love to look at. In that moment, the whole body shifts in seconds. You don't need 10 years of psychoanalysis. It switches in seconds.
So I have a question. I think I'm more in his camp where I'm, say I'm having an intrusive thought, and then I think, okay, stop that. I'm on a beach in Hawaii.
Can I interrupt you right there?
Yeah.
You say, stop that. So does that imply the expectation that the brain shouldn't think that to begin with? Or are you comfortable with the thought was thought, I'll die, and then is followed by the thought, oh, that's just a thought. The reality is, I don't know.
No, it's more, my brain feeling guilty about thinking that.
Okay.
You know, so I'm thinking, okay, I got this bad thought, and now I'm on a beach, and then my brain's saying, yeah, but you're sitting there thinking about being on the beach when you really want to think about the bad thing, you know, sort of like him, you know?
Yeah, so then we learn that certainty is really important for you. You prefer negative certainty than living with the reality of uncertainty. So if you love certainty or need certainty, I propose two things. One is that you start to consider, am I someone who wants to become more literate at being comfortable with uncertainty? Because that's a challenge. That's like learning Cantonese, but it can be done. Or, now I lost my train of thought. The other scenario is, I really want certainty. No way I'm giving up my need for certainty. Then see if you can do something in that moment that is certain. What do you feel right now is certain? You know, your husband is here. Where is he? Oh, he was here. Yeah.
Wandering around, yeah.
So, that's, is it certain that he's here? So something in that category. Okay. You know, I'll call my son. I called him before I walked over, my youngest. I said, wish me luck. That was certain. And
so you're saying live in the moment.
That's the only place where we are anyway. So you're never anywhere other than in the moment.
But the problem is we're thinking about future.
When you look, you can take an inventory for yourself. When I realized that I spent the vast majority of my mental time either in regrets about the past or fears of the future, it felt like a waste. It was a big chunk. And I was just motivated to not wanting to spend my time that way, particularly since I can't change the past and I have no control over the future. The only thing I have is right now. You and I looking at each other and trying to figure this out. The only thing you have. So when you say living in the moment, it sounds like, it's like a project, like building a house. You are living in the moment. That's the only thing you have right now, right here. No yesterday, no tomorrow.
But if you're afraid, you're living in the moment being afraid. That's what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, but afraid is not can anyone connect to the emotion fear right now? Okay, you feel it? Okay, where do you feel it in your body? Abdomen. Some people will feel it in your chest. Some people feel it here. Wherever that slide I showed. So let's see if we can change that. We talked about thought. You all can create positive thought. We talked about needs. We talked a little bit about creating certainty. So let's talk about changing emotions. So the ones that can connect to fear or feel it right now, with your eyes closed or with your eyes open, doesn't matter. Actually, let's test it. Take a deep breath and have your eyes open. And when I say take a deep breath, I mean kind of feel the air go through your nostrils, down your throat, expand your chest. There's kind of a physicality to taking a breath. Can you actually feel it? And then do the same thing with your eyes closed. Again, feel breath through your nose, down your throat. And for some people, closing their eyes will come with a bigger sense of comfort. For some, it will come with a lower or less sense of comfort, which often has to do with control. People that were traumatized, not just by cancer, but in other ways, when they close their eyes, have more of a sense of feeling out of control. And for those, I don't recommend to meditate with their eyes closed. closed, because then it defeats the purpose. Here you're meditating, you breathing your butt off, and it doesn't help because you're stressed about having your eyes closed.
Can I join my partner again over here?
Keith, meet Joan. Joan, meet Keith.
It seemed to me that you are saying that in the thought process, one can acknowledge somewhere inside that it is not where one wants the thought to be, and therefore take the thought somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it.
And yet, when expressed with the word stop, I wanted to stop myself, or anything that expresses a judgmental quality, that raised some concern or acknowledgement of that judgment, but yet isn't that judgment inherently part of the process?
Well, I wish it weren't. You're absolutely right. A lot of us cannot just observe thought and observe emotion. Most of us, a lot of us, have judgment around. I shouldn't feel, I shouldn't think. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, but I'm saying that I'm not sure that it inherently is negative or without productivity. Even if one says, I'm going to now meditate, it's because you made a judgment that you will find value or some progress in that. And so I'm not sure, for me at least, that it's inherently wrong or negative or destructive to judge thoughts I'm having if it helps me move it to a different place.
I'm with you. I mean, I don't care what you're doing, as long as you are in where? The comfortable zone. If we look at the body again, and we can now take this opportunity to talk about breath. Why are you all being sent to meditation classes and breathing classes up the kazoo? The reason for that is that little brain up there is connected to the lung, to the heart, as this picture shows. And the connection from the lung and the heart is the vagus nerve that goes straight, fat, big fiber cable into the brain. And it's the strongest inducer, natural inducer of this parasympathetic stuff. You know, we don't want the one on the right. That gives us trouble. We want the one on the left, the comfortable one, you know, in the picture up here, the rest and digest. You know, ideally we should be in a balance, but most of us, without even knowing, are in a constant, again, what's called sympathetic hyperarousal, this fight and flight and freeze thing. I mean, even if you can check yourself, I mean, how often are you sitting like this? That's called muscle tension. I should have put that up there in the muscle category. So most of us have kind of almost a chronic component. So if you critics say, I have thought X and don't like that thought, I'm producing thought Y, and it gets you over there, I'm with you. That's the goal. We got to get you over there. Either through thought changing, you all demonstrated that you can do it. Emotion, I'm curious, we got stuck on the emotion. I said, you know, some people said I can do immediately connect to fear. Feel it here. And then we did a little, I think we didn't finish the exercise, did we? Yeah, didn't finish the exercise. How did that happen? So let's go back. I asked you, what did I ask you to do? We connected to, oh yeah, exactly. That's how we, yeah, so I'm glad we had this little conversation about why it's so important to breathe and be conscious of the breath. So you can just imagine turning on the vagus nerve to signal this thing up here, calm down. Yeah?
Where is the vagus nerve? I was told in mindful meditation this afternoon that somehow if you breathe out and you contract your abdomen, that is going against the vagus nerve and is helping you.
Yeah, keep it simple. You know, if meditation becomes stressful because you're not doing it right, then again, it defeats the purpose. I get that a lot. Like, we want to breathe, I'm not breathing right. The second you have the thought that you're not doing something right, you're right over there in the sympathetic hyperarousal. I mean, most of us are very judgmental with ourselves. Most of us not doing this right, did this wrong yesterday, we'll do it wrong again tomorrow. All those thoughts keep you constantly over there. And so in your situation, when you actually look, if we take it anatomically, from the brain through the spine, that's that fat worm in the middle, those blue things on the left are ultimately connected through every organ. And the important thing is that you just imagine that you have that cable going from here down there and back, and you try to get comfortable with the breath. What's your way of breathing? Are you someone, yeah, I am prepared to stand by. Let's stand by. Are you someone, I don't, if we need it again, we'll do something about it. Now again, lost my train of thought. Oh, comfortable breathing. What is your way that feels pleasant to breathe? Are you someone who enjoys feeling the air going through your nose? Are you someone who kind of feels it, I'm pulling my shoulders up too much, some people expand down here, whatever, what kind of breather am I? If breathing itself becomes stressful, bad activity, then you might be better off in the category, let's change emotion, or address needs. That's really a simple one. That it's immediate with respect to, and I really want you to experiment with that. If you now know it has to do with needing certainty and needing control, well, get certainty and get control, but where it's feasible. A lot of us then bang on doors desperately to get certainty and control where we cannot have it. You got to introduce feasibility.
A while ago you said not many people can reason themselves out of emotion or thought, and you put virtually everybody in that category, and you said that there are ways to do this. What are those?
No, I said reason. To produce a thought is different than reasoning yourself out of thought. What I see people do, and maybe it's not a smart choice of words on my part, so let me clarify. What I see people do is they think, oh my goodness, I didn't eat the right carrots today, and tomorrow I should have run more, or whatever healthy thing you're supposed to do, so I won't get the cancer again, and then you're judgmental. And then you say, oh, I shouldn't think that way. That's not good for me. Since it's not good, I will now not think this anymore. I would use that as an illustration of thinking, and that won't work because the thought just happens. But you can say, oh, it thinks, and I want to think something else.
The mind.
What would you what should you do in that case in which you feel like, oh, I would today, and
So
how do you change your?
Yeah, one word that I didn't put up there is perfection. In this moment, you're confronted with judgment. And again, it probably applies to 99% of the people in this room, is you have a certain expectation of how to perform. And when you say, I didn't do it and I should have done it, you don't accept what you have done.
So just say, I'll from this point on, I'll be better or something.
Well, that usually doesn't work because that's in the category, reason yourself out of emotion or thought. There, I recommend to say, oh, I have a pronounced need for perfection. I want to be someone who gets everything perfect. I want to run 10 miles every day. I only eat vegan. I climb Mount Everest, and that'll keep me healthy. And say, oh, that's a high expectation I have for myself. Do I want to study, to use figurative language, Cantonese and learn to ease up on myself? Or fulfill the need for perfection and then make your lists. because they're ultimately an expression of perfection. You know, today I did 5. If I do 7 tomorrow, I'm better. That you actually can do because that's in your control. It's always hard when we go against ourselves. So the example you gave me, you know, I should be different. I messed up today and tomorrow I'm better. It is a tough one. You know, that's where I'm not that keen on the will category. You know, one of the first slides I put up, the mind, emotion, thought, something else, and will was up there. And will somehow doesn't seem to work too well. I mean, there are some people that are very willful, but a lot of us, you know, we mess up. And it's okay. But with an expectation for perfection, you can't, you know, accept yourself. Acceptance fits into the equation also. And that's a big challenge. I'm glad you're pointing it out because, you know, here I stand and make it sound so easy. All I want you to know is it's those 4 things that I want you to start entertaining. Who am I? How do I fit in these categories? And how do I want to change them? And you will face challenges. You know, the need for perfection and control and certainty are big obstacles. Yeah.
What do you think about expressing your emotions in a way like catharsis?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's okay?
Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel after a good cry or so, I
feel good.
relieved, and then my thoughts can change, my emotion can change.
If you're in the category expressor, yes, by all means. And thank you for mentioning it. Crying for a lot of people is associated with judgment of weakness. And I call it a body function. It's flow. It's like going to the bathroom. I mean, if I now tell you to not go to the bathroom anymore, it wouldn't work. So to tell you not to cry if you are someone who expresses would not be good for you. The problem is if people express and you're with a non-expressor, a suppressor, that gets triggered by it because they get scared or they feel like they got to take action, they might judge you for it. So then say, well, what are you crying about? Life is good. And for you, the expression of tears has nothing to do with the judgment of life not being good, but it has valve function. And so if you're aware of that, you can point that out to, I'm not sure why I'm looking at you. But you know I'm looking at you. And I don't know if it applies in your relationship, but it often is a gender issue that women on average express more than men are comfortable with. And then they go into fixing mode, say, well, why are you feeling this way? It doesn't help, and you know, you shouldn't be stressed, when in fact the sole purpose of the emotion is to express having a valve function. You had a question?
Yeah, I do, and it's about conscious versus subconscious. You know, you can go about your day and you think everything's fine and you're happy and you're thinking happy thoughts, etc. And then all of a sudden you notice that you're really stressed. You can physically feel that you're really stressed. And then you start to think about it, you're thinking, oh, I've been worried about this. And I haven't let it rise to the top of my consciousness, but you know, when I recognize that my body is stressed, I realize that that's what's going on. You know, so I feel like all those hours my body has been stressed, and I haven't had a chance to really process it mentally. So, you know, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, because it does happen a lot that we go about our day, you're busy, this thing is busy, you're doing something, you don't realize that part of you is worrying and the body is stressed. And it has to do with awareness. That's a sense you can sharpen. The same way I said in the beginning, when I became aware that I spent the majority of my time thinking about regrets in the past and worries about the future, I was stunned. I had no awareness for that. And the thought that I spent 90% in something that's not real, controllable, or I have any influence over seemed absurd. So to sharpen your sense, to occasionally check in with yourself. Just how do I sit? Do I sit like this, or like this, or like this, or like this? You know, some people, when they're stressed, they have, it's also a divided function in the body, that they're more stressed on one side than the other. So you might notice that you sit and this arm hangs, but this arm stands up. You know, it's not naturally holding that way. It would hang following gravity, so it's an effort to stand like that. And since we forget, I often tell people to use anchors that they're using anyway to do a particular thing. All of you brush your teeth. So whenever you brush your teeth, check in. Am I comfortable? Uncomfortable? Don't make it complicated. You don't even have to go to, oh, is it the thought? Is it the emotion? Is it whatever? Just say, am I comfortable? If you're comfortable, don't worry about anything. If you're not comfortable, then you can go through the process you just described. Was it a thought? And you don't even, you don't even have to analyze it. You can just say, okay, I'm not comfortable. What means do I have to get in this parasympathetic box over there? I presumably have thought, I have presumably emotion, I have needs, and I have the body. You can, every time you go to the bathroom, every time you turn on your car, every time you get on your bike, every time you turn on your computer, things you do anyway. Caveat, it gets forgotten. When I work with people and trying to figure out what are good cues to shift you into a more comfortable state, it gets forgotten. So whatever it takes for you. You can put a little mark on your hand, something that you see, on your pen, reminders, and then eventually it becomes second nature. My body now signals me when I'm here in some unproductive fashion. More questions? We're out of time. Any loose ends?
It seems like changing the thought is easier than changing the emotion. And I just wanted to see what you thought about that.
Depends.
It depends.
Yeah, totally depends. In the beginning I said some of us are very thought-driven, some of us are more emotion-driven, some of us are body-driven, some of us are very need-driven. If we can't fulfill our needs, we're really mad. So this idea of delayed gratification can be very, very hard. Can we live with not getting what we want right now? So play with it. I mean, in general, do it all. See what applies best. Always do it with ease. If you go against yourself, won't work. If you do something that you can breathe all you want, if you have a concurrent stressful thought, it will overrule the breath. The stressful thought is a more powerful inducer of the sympathetic nervous system than the breath is one of the parasympathetic. But keep it simple. Am I comfortable? Am I uncomfortable? How can I get from uncomfortable to comfortable with those 4 things?